Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's American Association of Industry Veterinarians webinar. My name is Mia Carey, and as AAIV's president-elect, I'm very happy to serve as your host for the evening. As you may have heard, we are recording this webinar for those that wanted to join us this evening but had a conflict. And we'll make sure we send out that link to you after the webinar, and we will be sharing Dr. Chaddock's slides as well. We are very happy to have Dr. Mike Chaddock with us this evening. He's going to lead us through a presentation titled Fix the Debt, Our Future, Our Responsibility. Dr. Chaddock received his DVM degree from the Michigan State University and an executive master's degree in leadership from Georgetown University. Currently, Mike is the Associate Dean for Administration at MSU, CVM, and has extensive experience not only in academia, but also with veterinary policy, advocacy, public health, and profession-wide strategic leadership. I'd like to share just a couple housekeeping items before we jump into the meat of our evening's webinar. We have muted the lines, and that's simply in order to maximize the listening experience for everyone involved. If you do have questions, please make sure you use either the chat function that you will see to the lower right, or you can submit a question via the question mechanism. Either way, I'll be monitoring those throughout the call, and towards the end of the call, we've saved time so that Mike can answer a few of the questions that come through. We will also have several polling questions that will be provided throughout the presentation, so we encourage you to engage in those and share your insights. I'll explain the session evaluation process, including how to obtain your CE certificate for this program, at the conclusion of the presentation. So that's everything in terms of housekeeping and updates, and now it's time to get started. So Mike, welcome. We are so happy to have you with us this evening.
Thank you, Mia, and I'm really pleased to be here. And first of all, I need to apologize to your audience because I do have a case of laryngitis, and it arrived about last Thursday, and I hoped it would be gone by this evening. So I apologize. I'll try to talk slowly and enunciate my words. But it's a real pleasure to be with the group this afternoon or late this evening. And I think this is a really interesting and obviously a very important issue that we're going to talk about. And some of your listeners or participants hopefully were at the Fix the Debt Summit here at Michigan State earlier this year, but a number were not. So I'm really pleased to be able to present some of the things that happened and how we got to where we are. So we will start, and what I'm going to do this evening is give you some background information, and there will be quite a few facts and figures, but I thought that was necessary so that we're all on the same page and we have the same background as we move forward. Then, of course, the actual summit that occurred at Michigan State, a little bit about how it came about how it was organized, what actually happened at the summit, the outcomes of the summit, and then lastly, the next steps, because it's not what happened at the summit that's important, it's really the implementation and what everybody needs to do as we move forward. So it's easy to put on a summit, it's not easy to keep the actions moving, so this is a great opportunity to emphasize those things. So a little bit about background and information. And here you can see that we have a lot of numbers, but I do think it's very important for people to stop and reflect a little bit here. And these are the median educational debt for the 2015 class of graduates, and including those with zero debt, because we do have students that have no debt at graduation, but the median educational debt was $144,468. So try to get that number in your head and think about that a minute. And then when we break that out to the median veterinary school graduates with debt is $156,583. So that included those, we took those out that didn't have any debt. And then I think it's astonishing that you look at nearly a fifth, 20% of the graduates nationally in the U.S. had at least $200,000 in debt. And then again, there are some, and this was about 10% of the classes, have debt over $300,000 and $400,000. So those are, I think, pretty astonishing figures to keep in mind as we move forward. So let's look at the other side of the equation. What about the salary? The mean full-time starting salary. Now, full-time starting salary does not include those who are taking internships or residency programs. These are full-time working new graduates. The mean full-time starting salary, $70,117. If we look at those that are just going into private practice, it's a little bit higher, $70,885. Now, over the last 15 years, the debt has increased by about $5,700 per year. But if we take those with no debt, non-zero debt, that have a debt, it's increased $6,200 per year. Per year. So if you take that over 15 years, you can see it's an extraordinary amount of increase in debt. And we'll see a graph that shows this in just a second. This next slide, the top one there, we repeat this mean educational debt, but I really want to zero in on the next part of that first piece. Unfortunately, we look at this number. In 2015, the mean debt was $7,500 higher for women than men, and the mean starting salary $2,400 lower for women than men. And I think every one of us should find that an appalling figure, especially in a profession today where we have certainly more women than men, and certainly in our classes today, 80 to 85% women, yet we still see this discrepancy in income and also an increase in debt for women. The mean starting salary for new veterinarians increased. It did increase, but only approximately $1,200 per year from 2001 to 2008, which we have, of course, the great economic downturn and recession, which saw a downturn in salaries and not recoveries until beginning in 2013. So you can see that the salary part of the equation has had a real hit, but the increase in debt kept going up every year. Now we look at what the states are spending. The states, and this is nationally, spent $9.74 on higher education per $1,000 in personal income in 1990. 1990. But by 2015, this figure dropped to $5.55. So the burden of covering the cost of college has shifted from taxpayers or state money to individual students. And Dean Baker, one of the quotes from Dean Baker at the summit was, the single biggest factor behind the issue is the decrease in public funding for higher education. And I do have a short video here that I think if we click on this and bring this up, we can show you here, if I can do that. Let's see. The cost of veterinary medical education in the United States is rising, I would say, with the normal amount of inflation. Now let me explain that. When you look at the actual costs out of the pocket to a student or to a parent, yes, absolutely, it's rising. I'll tell you why. I'll give you the 80-20 rule. And I'm to talk primarily about state-supported institutions. When I went to school, 80% of my education at Michigan State University was paid for by the state of Michigan, the taxpayers, through taxes, of the money that then is given to Michigan State University from our state legislature. 20% was paid by my family. In today's world, it's just the opposite. Only about 20%, give or take, is paid for by the state of Michigan in the amount coming in from taxes coming through to the university. 80% is paid for by the students or the students' families. So when you look at that, and you certainly as a parent or a student say, oh my goodness, absolutely the cost out of their pocket has risen, continues to rise. So when you look at that total amount, absolutely the amount of money coming out of the parent's pocket or the student's pocket is rising. The only other couple sources for veterinary medical education is philanthropy or certainly scholarships. So what we're looking at, and many schools are looking at, is how do we increase the scholarships to those students? That's going to help them. But when you look at the actual cost of veterinary medical education over the last, say, 20, 25 years, sure, it's risen. It's risen with inflation just like anything else has, but the formula is totally different. Okay, so that's the 80-20 rule. And you'll hear many people who are at the summit, they're talking about that. Dean Baker, when he talks about the veterinary debt and how are the payments being done and who's actually has that burden of payments, it's really a flip-flop of what it was several years ago. With that, however, if you look at the student loan interest rates, the student loan interest rates really are the single largest impact on student debt. And 88% of our veterinary students across the country borrow from the federal student loan program. And the difference today from many of us, I think, that are on this webinar, are that the interest rates that the students start paying, the accrual of interest, starts when those students take out that loan. So that first-year veterinary student, when he or she comes in and he or she makes a decision to take out a student loan that first year, interest starts accruing. And that interest is not 2%, 3%, it's anywhere from 6 to 8%. So if you look at that over a 4-year period of veterinary medical education, by the time the students graduate and they do take out loans throughout that whole period, the amount that they owe is a tremendous amount more than the actual student loan which they took out when they first entered veterinary school. Compare that to many of us. When we went to school, student loans did not start accruing interest until we graduated, until that first payment was due approximately 6 months after graduation when you went into employment. If you went into further education, if you went into a PhD program or a master's program, it still was deferred until after all of that education. So it's a tremendous difference today with students than it was certainly when I went to school and when many of us on this webinar went to school. Now, what about the application, the number of applicants? And I hear many times, I'll hear deans say, oh my goodness, we had 10 applicants for every seat. We had 1,000 applicants for a class of 100. But that's really not accurate. When you look at the number of places that students apply today, many students apply anywhere from 4 to 10 colleges, some even more. So that there are not applicants that we all have differently from those schools. So in 2016, there were actually 6,667 applicants for those 4,227 first-year seats, or about 1.6 applicants per seat. And according to AAVMC and Dr. Greenhill, you can see her quote there, we can continue to anticipate a slow decline in the number of applicants. This can only be abated by active recruitment and education. And I think this is a new norm. It's a new norm for the CVMs. I think many schools have, well, we shall build it and they shall come. You know, we have all these applicants. We don't have to actively go out and recruit the brightest and the best. And I believe those days are gone. And I can tell you here at Michigan State, you know, we're scrambling. We're scrambling to put together an active recruiting program and working with our other universities and colleges here in Michigan in order to be sure that we are attracting an applicant pool that is qualified to be veterinarians. So this is a very important thing as we move along. So let's take a look at the graph here. And I think this tells the story. The bottom line, of course, the bottom horizontal line are the years from 2001 to 2025. The left vertical line is the amount of income, and the right vertical line is the debt to income ratio. And we're going to talk about debt to income ratio a lot. This is the debt, student debt at the time of graduation to the starting income. That's that ratio. So you can see the bottom line here, which is the real weighted income. You can see the line here, and up here we are, about the $70,000 mark that we talked about earlier. And the prediction is that the incomes will rise, but by 2023-24, only bumping up to the $90,000 starting salary. You look at the red line, which is the real debt, and you can see the steep amount of debt. And here we are at 2013-14, and you can see the trajectory is almost a 45-degree angle going north. Now, if you look over here, what did I do here? You look here, and you can see that the debt to income ratio, which is over here on the right side, and we're talking about how the debt to income ratio has gone up and up. This was the recession when we did have a dip, but here again you can see it's increasing, and you'll see in my presentation I talk about it anywhere currently from about a 1.9 to a 2.2 to 1. So what that means is that the amount of debt that new graduates are coming out with is at least twice as much as their starting income. And as I said earlier, we have many students, about 10% of the classes, that actually have a $300,000 to $400,000 amount of debt. So these lines are not coming closer together at all as we look out into the future. And this is a real issue, and I'll get into more detail here in a minute about how that's affecting our applicants. This one shows this distribution of debt to income ratio. And the bottom line here again is that debt to income ratio. And here we are about 2 to 1. 1.9 to 2.2 is about what we're hearing. So right here in the middle of the graph is about where the average is today. We do have some students, of course, which have zero debt. We have some students that have less than the 2 to 1. But we have a number of students with a huge increase spike here at the right that's actually 4 to 1. You can see that, you want to say a nice bell curve, but the distribution of that debt, and those here on this end are way, way over the 2 to 1. And you'll see in a minute that ideal by the economists and by Dr. Dix at AVMA is that we should be aiming for a 1.4. But you can see that the vast majority of our graduates are way over here on the right side of that screen. So what do the students, where is that cost? What are they actually paying for? Well, you can see on the pie chart here, 68% is tuition and fees. And on the short video I showed you, those tuition and fees continue to increase every year. State support for our state schools continues to decrease. We hear about living expenses. There's a lot of discussions about living expenses and transportation. It's really a very small piece of the pie. Now, can it improve? Can students probably do a better job on their expenses, their transportation? Probably, absolutely. Books and materials, the equipment for veterinary school, other expenses is really a minor part of the actual distribution of the total educational debt for our students, with the vast piece here being tuition and fees, and this piece of the pie continues to increase. So let's break it down to, are there parts of our profession or career choices that our new graduates go in, how does that have an effect on their debt in their career choice? You can see here, this is up through 2015, and this blue line, which is the highest one, highest debt postgraduate plans, are for those that are going into residencies. The residencies, of course, are usually 3 years at least. These individuals are not making much money at all, but they're banking on the fact that if they do a residency program, if they become board certified, if possibly they go into academia, that they will down the road have a larger income in their career. So that's a gamble. You can see the others are here, the internships. You can go on down the line here, public practice. In all, the average is right here. And this is where you get your average of your debt. So yeah, there is some difference, of course, in what type of career you choose as a veterinarian on the amount of debt that you're going to be able to service and you're going to be able to carry. With this group, of course, I'll say, gambling a little bit, of course, that they're going to make more money because of going into being a specialist or a board certification. This is an interesting one. This is the one that Dean Baker talks about. The veterinary medicine is the canary in the coal mine. You can see the different health professions listed here. You can see at the bottom, of course, years. This is an old slide, but I think it tells the story very well, even though it goes up to 2010. I would dare to say it would be a lot worse if it was current. Over here on the left is the ratio, again, the debt to income. You can see here at 2010, it was a little bit above the 1.6, 1.6 to 1. Today, I kept talking about 1.9 to 2, it would be up here. But you can see our other health professions are a lot lower than we are on that ratio of debt to income. Now, I think we all know that if you go into if you're a physician, if you're going into orthopedics, all sorts of things here, your salary is a lot more than the salary of veterinarians. So it has a lot to do with the salary side of the equation. But the bottom line is, when you compare veterinary medicine to all these other professions, our debt and our ratio of debt to income is much higher and much more, I'll say, out of whack than what it should be. And today we're talking about the 1.4. This is 2010. Today we're up here. So we are really the canary in the coal mine. And the dean talks about the other professions watching veterinary medicine. What are we doing? How are we going to correct this? Because they don't want to get into the same story that we're in today. So, Mia, this gets us to our first poll question.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. All right, I will go ahead and launch the poll question. So for those of you that are listening in, you should be able to see the poll question come up on your screen, and if you'll select your answer, we'll leave this open for about 30 seconds, and then we will close out and share the results. We're almost at 100% voted. A couple of you, come on, we want 100%. I can't really tell which one of you have voted. I can just tell the percent that are listening that have voted. We're at 92%. We'll call that pretty darn good. And I'll go ahead and close the poll. Let's see here. Give me 1 second, Mike, and then I'll share the results of the poll. Okay, so Mike, I believe you probably won't be able to see the results, so I'll read them off to you, but the group on the line today feel that in terms of which of the following has the single largest impact on student loan debt, 82% selected tuition and fees, and then the remaining 18% selected student loan interest rates.
Okay, very interesting. I will say that you have the top two correct. But really, when you look at the numbers and you look at the total number of what's causing it, it really is A. It's the student loan interest rates. Yes, tuition and fees are, as I said, the highest part of the pie, but when you add and do the math and put the 6 to 8% interest rates on those tuition and fees over the length of the debt, it's really the student loan interest rates. So I understand the tuition and fees, and I'm glad that everyone understood it's not the living expenses in which we see our students in. So very good. We will move on. Thank you, Mia.
You bet.
Okay, I want to talk just a minute here about the bubble market theory. And those of you on the webinar who certainly in industry are attuned to economics will understand this. I had to go through it a little bit, but it makes a lot of sense, especially when I looked at what's happening probably here at Michigan State. So the bubble market. So if you take an asset, in our case, veterinary medical education, which is an asset, and it trades for increasingly higher prices, the tuition in which we talked about that our students are paying. And then in turn, it is bought by people, the students, they're paying the tuition, and hopefully about the future value that they turn around and they sell to others, which are their clients when they are in practice. And they have even a more optimistic view of that value. That keeps them coming to the colleges. So as the clients keep paying more and more for veterinarian services, and let's all think back over the last 20 years when we said, geez, we have to increase income, we have to increase prices, we have to increase the amount we're charging. So as clients keep paying more and more for the services, the students should be willing to pay more for the education that enables them to sell those services. However, the CVMs, the colleges, they can sustain their high tuitions only if the students can be convinced that they're going to have higher returns in the form of payments from future clients. It's a real circle here. But the amount that the colleges are able to charge the students then is linked to how much we pay the veterinarians now and how much we plan to pay them in the future. So I've heard some people say, which I can't dispute, well, we keep increasing the tuition, yes, because probably we know the states are not helping us, but we increase the tuition because we can, because the students and the families will pay it. The provost here at Michigan State, in some of the early discussions we had with her about it, said to the dean, are you filling your classes? Well, the answer was yes. Are they qualified students? The answer is yes. Well, then what's your worry? And of course, the dean, being a visionary, said, I'm worried about the future. I'm worried about the day when I will be able to come here and tell you I can't fill my classes with qualified students. So let's continue with this bubble market. So we realize we're in a bubble market when if there's a sudden collapse in what clients are willing to pay veterinarians. I've heard some of this. I actually, of course, I take my animals to the veterinarian here, and the amount of money, I had to think twice about a couple things. So the collapse will occur when the clients are willing to pay veterinarians, makes it impossible to sell the veterinary medical education at its current prices. Then the applications will fall. CVMs maybe will have to cut tuition to continue to have our applicants. And maybe some will actually close. Are we going to have the number of CVMs tomorrow, wherever that tomorrow may be, as we have today? And we're faced also with an increased number of new schools on the horizon. So Dr. Ash at the Center for Health Equity and Promotion at the University of Pennsylvania says, the bubble will burst when potential students recognize that the costs of training aren't matched by later returns, their incomes, and be able to service their debt. So that's the bubble market theory. as it pertains to veterinary medicine and veterinary medical education. So I'm interested in what your thoughts are. So then the second poll question, Mia, is do you believe that veterinary education is in a bubble market? So this is not a right or wrong answer. This is what you as participants on the webinar think. So I'm interested to know what you think.
Thank you, Mike. The poll is open, so if the listeners would please make their selection. We'll leave it open here for just a moment more. If you haven't made a selection yet and you'd like to, now's the time. Okay, we have close to 100%, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And I will share the results with the group. Okay, the results are in, Mike, and we have a 50-50 split between yes, the bubble will burst within the next 5 years, and 50% say yes, but we will make necessary corrections.
Okay, and nobody thought this was just hype over nothing?
No, 0% selected that option.
Ah, interesting. So I'm hoping when we have a few minutes at the end, maybe some people will make some comments about why they answered the way they did or what they think we need to do to help correct this situation. So very interesting. I appreciate that. Okay, let's look a little bit now at this future of our profession. But this slide, the applicants are paying attention. They're paying attention to what's happening with student debt, with income. You can see in 2014, which is just a couple years ago, 53% of applicants said they were willing to pay up to $150,000 for their veterinary medical education. While a year later, only 37% of the applicants are willing to pay $150,000 for a veterinary education. So what that tells me, and I might be wrong here, but it tells me that we're really looking at an application pool that is taking a close look at this, and I think it's reflecting into the fact that we're having less applicants because some students are looking at this and they're saying, wow, I'm not going to go into this profession at this point in time. I may be choosing another health profession or something totally different. So it is beginning to have an effect on the choices the students are making to applying to veterinary medical education. So what is the status quo scenario? In other words, what if we don't do anything? What if we continue down the road like we've been doing? So we're going to look at the impact. And I have an impact here of 5 to 10 years. I don't know if that's realistic. Maybe that impact should be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. I'm not so sure it's 5 to 10 years down the road. But if we continue the way we're doing, I believe we will have fewer applicants, so that'll be money problems for the colleges of veterinary medicine. I can tell you that every provost has a budget, and the budget for the provost is to bring in education tuition dollars from every college. If we have fewer applicants, we're going to have probably quality reduction in those applicants. What may end up, today we don't think there's a shortage for professions. We may end up down the road with a shortage. And what about animal health and welfare concerns? Will we as veterinarians be able to provide service to society as we have been and it's expected from us as veterinarians? We say that we're one of the first defenses for food safety, for public health problems. Will we be in the future? And if the cost is too high, what's that going to do to the diversity? We hear about that we're not a diverse profession. If the cost is too high, I don't think that'll help our diversity issues. It'll have a socioeconomic impact. And I believe it will be continuing our gender disparity that we're seeing today in the profession. Now that impact, again, I have on here 5 to 10 years down the road. Remember that. Because the next one is what's the impact now? At the bottom I have now and continuing. So here we are up here with our colleges of veterinary medicine and the profession, new graduates that are coming out, they're starting their careers. I think I've made the case that there's a high debt. Now, can we connect the dots and say that this leads to wellness issues, to mental and physical health issues? No, I cannot scientifically connect that dot. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of research that needs to be done in that area. The high debt, I still think, will give us quality of animal care concerns. Are we going to be looking at taking care of the animals for the animals' sake, or are we going to be taking care of them because we have to charge more money in order to be able to pay and service those debts? We have dreams unfulfilled. Who are we, as veterinarians in our profession, to tell young people, well, you shouldn't be a veterinarian? Who told us that we shouldn't be a veterinarian? We had our dreams, they have their dreams. So this is leading to a lot of veterinarians today telling young people, very talented young people, you shouldn't go into this profession. And I think that's a travesty that we're facing. We do have adult choices that are curtailed. We have a number of students, a number of them right here at MSU that we talk with, that are saying, either as students or new graduates, that, hey, I can't start a family. We have decided because of our debt, we cannot have children. And especially when you have married couples which are both new graduates in veterinary medicine. And then, again, the bottom, this high debt, this dissuasion that is coming from veterinary students and new graduates to people behind them, to high school students, to people, again, who really want to be veterinarians, and they see their peers a few years older than they are saying, I never would have become a veterinarian if I would have known this. So this becomes a real snowball of the status quo and why we cannot stay where we are today in this dilemma. So here we have what we put together called an economics of education component map. I'm going to talk in the actual summit and how it was put together and how we kind of attacked the issue. But I want to show here in the middle, this is this debt to income ratio that we've talked about, anywhere from 1.9 to 1 to 2 to 1. And what are the influencers? What causes this debt to income ratio? Now we have two sides of the equation. We're going to start down here a little bit. This is the starting income. Starting income today about $70,000. What can we do in order to increase the starting income? A number of things. The value of the graduate. Are we graduating graduates who are providing value out there in the working world? The practice economics. If they're going into practice, is that practice they're going into doing the best they can economically in order to pay those new graduates? Are our new graduates really negotiating properly for their salaries? And what is the practice market? We talked about, of course, the increased amount of costs for health care in our pets today. So this is the income side of the equation. Now we have a lot of things on this side which, of course, add to the debt. We have, as I said here, the veterinary tuition, sources of debt, the DVM tuition. We've got the operating costs for the universities. We have university policies on tuition. At Michigan State, if you're an out-of-state student and you enter as an out-of-state student the first year as a veterinary student, there's no way you can become an in-state student during that entire 4 years. I don't care if you show that you worked here during that time. Michigan State has a policy, you're an out-of-state student. So a real disadvantage on some university policies. State and federal support, accreditation standards, all of these things add in here to the tuition. Sources of debt, we've got the pre-veterinary degree. Now this is an undergraduate degree, it could be a master's degree, it could be a PhD degree. Every one of the students in our class, our second year class now, every one of them has at least a 4-year degree. What happened to the 2-year pre-veterinary requirements in order for students to be able to enter into our professional program? So if we're choosing students with a 4-year degree or above, they're entering with pre-veterinary degree expense debt, which certainly is higher than a 2-year pre-veterinary requirements. They do have their living expenses. We talked about that. Can they do something about reducing their living expenses? Loan repayment options. Here again, these loan repayment options today are strangling these students with the amount of expense and the amount of interest expense they're paying. So what about debt reduction? We talked about increasing scholarships. We talked about pre-graduating work, being able to work during the time, and the budget and living expenses. So it's a complicated formula is really what I want to get across here. It's not just one thing that needs to be tweaked or changed, or pointing a finger at one thing and say, boy, if only the colleges would reduce tuition. It's not just one issue. Or I've heard if only the students would not drive Beamers or brand new cars, or if they put 4 in a room instead of 1 in a room to live. It's a combination of things that are causing this situation. So what is the goal? Here you can see we're talking about a 2.1. I said anywhere from a 1.9 to a 2.1 debt to income ratio. And if this is where we are today, and this is what Dr. Dix from the AVMA says is where we are, and the goal that he has put for our profession is 1.4 to 1 by 2025. Some people might say, wow, that's a long time. It's 9 years from now, 2025. Can we go from here to here? Dr. Dix has said, okay, here are 4 things that we need to do. We need to eliminate expenditures in excess of cost. This is that student expenditure. Those are living expenses. Can they decrease them? Can they decrease them $22 million over this time? If they did just that, he says the 2.1 will get down to 1.95, one factor. What if we eliminate the interest on loans while they're in school? We mentioned earlier that those loans interest rates start immediately when they take that out. That would save $22 million, get down to 1.89. Well, can we grow those starting salaries? Can we make our new students more practice ready, career ready, so they're bringing in a higher amount of income? If we did that by 10%, 43 million, that would bring us to 1.81. Still not 1.4. Can we reduce the education cost by 10%? Can the colleges do this? And how can we do that? The number one cost of education for the colleges is personnel. Should we actually become smaller? Should we become smaller in our education process? If we do this, we could save 96 million, bring it down to 1.79. You can see that not any one of these things will bring this to 1.4 to 1. But if we bring all of these together, Dr. Dix predicts that we could get down below the 1.4 to 1.38. However, this is the most important thing over here on the left. For this to work, the challenge for the above scenarios to work means no potential recessions between now and 2025. We cannot have an increased number of students in the CVMs, and we can't have any more CVNs opening, if this is where we're going to get by doing this by 2025. I think it's a pretty tall order, because we can't do anything about this, recessions. I can tell you it's an easy equation. If we're going to reduce the amount of tuition per individual student, and the provost and the presidents of the university say you still, as a college, have to bring us in so much tuition money, the only way you can do it is increase the number of students in your class. And then certainly, we all know on the horizon we have more CVMs that are ready to start in graduating classes very soon. So it's a dilemma we're in. Can we get there? 50% of you said, yes, we're going to correct this, so I hope we are. So here's the poll question. Which one of the following goals do you think should receive the highest priority in reducing the student debt to starting income ratio? Again, this is your thoughts. It's not a right or wrong answer. What do you think?
Thank you, Mike, and the polling is open. We also have 3 questions that have been submitted so far. We will answer those at the end of the presentation, assuming that there's time, and if not, then I think, Mike, we will send those to you, and possibly, if you have time, we can get an answer for those via email, but we'll just see what the time allows here today.
Absolutely.
We'll leave this open for one more moment. Okay, we have the majority that have polled, so we will close the poll and share the results. Okay, so Mike, the results show that 70% of our attendees voted for eliminate interest on loans while in school, 20% reduce education costs by 10%, and the remaining 10% selected grow starting salaries by 10%.
Very good, very good information. And this eliminating interest on loans while in school, I can tell you this is something that every one of us can work on, because this is going to take a huge advocacy effort on the federal level, mostly on the federal level, of your senators, of your House of Representatives, because the Higher Education Act is scheduled. It was scheduled to be opened last year, but it was not. But Congress says they will open the higher education bill next year, and this is where those changes can occur. So I would really, really say become active with AVMA on their political action groups, and this is something that everyone can get involved with. So again, thank you very much for your input there. All right, a little bit of background, and these next slides will not take too long. I want to go back to NAVMEC, and I think everybody knows NAVMEC in 2008. And NAVMEC is like a fine wine. And I know Dr. Leininger's on the phone here, and I know she's smiling or on the webinar, but as NAVMEC gets a little age on it, I think people appreciate it more and more. But NAVMEC back in 2008 brought together hugest broad spectrum of people in the profession, and they had a charge to how can we identify changing societal demographics and what society will need from veterinary medical profession. Create a shared vision of core competencies for every graduate, and identify how veterinary medical education should evolve to meet those societal needs, and graduate veterinarians with identified core competencies. One of the 5 strategic goals of NAVMEC is to promote an economically viable education system for both colleges of veterinary medicine and the students. That is one of the goals of NAVMEC. And one of the objectives or action items under that goal was for AAVMC and AVMA to convene a workshop for educators and employers to look for new ways to address the issue of the ratio of student debt to graduate starting salary. That was back in 2008. That was 8 years ago. 8 years ago, NAVMEC said, we better be doing something about this. So in March of 2015, when Dr. Baker became dean here, he was away from our college for about 10 years, and when he came back and saw these figures that we talked about tonight, he said, my God, we've got to start doing something. So he invited AAVMC and AVMA to partner in hosting this initial facilitated summit that we had here this spring at MSU. So the summit information: what, who, where, and when. I think all of you are familiar with this. If you weren't there, I'm sure you've read about it. We hosted it here at MSU. The hosts were us and AVMA and AAVMC. We had 180 participants, and the 180 was capped by the fire marshal. I had people trying to get in the last minute. We couldn't take them. We had 4 groups: students and recent grads, employers of veterinarians, colleges, the educators, and then the veterinary organizations. It was held here in April. The collective goals were to agree on strategies to address the many facets of this challenge, to reduce this debt-to-income ratio to 1.4 to 1, raise awareness about the severity of the problem, and gain a shared understanding of the issues that contribute to the problem. Here are those 4 things that I showed you earlier from Dr. Dix about what he says we need to do to get to the 1.4 to 1. And I've superimposed here the 4 groups that we divided people in at the summit and had those 4 groups work on these issues. That's how we did the summit and how we broke it out. So these are the 10 recommendations that surfaced from those 4 groups. You can read through them. I'm not going to spend time. The JAVMA has covered this very, very nicely over several issues. And you can see that there's a number of them, and they all fall under those 4 areas. These are the ones which we really believe from that summit that we need to put kind of the meat on and really work on all of those. So where do we go from here? Where do we take these recommendations? So we're going to move from talking to doing. As I said at the beginning, it's easy to put on the summit. It's hard to implement. So what we've done, we've taken the 10 recommendations over here on the left. We call them focus areas, but these are the recommendations. We now have state and local action leaders. We have national action leaders. I'll talk a minute about those. And then we have reporters. And all of these 3 groups have kind of their charge here. The state and locals are to actually what's happening at the local scene on all of those things. Where are the best practices happening on the local scene? Sharing those best practices. What's happening at Michigan State that's working? What is an employer doing, a certain employer that's done to help increase salaries? So we're looking at the actual things at the state and local. The national individual is looking more at the national scene, such as when we talked about advocacy. AVMA and Gina Luke at AVMA and Kevin Kane at AAVMC, they're taking the national lead on this advocacy and organizing that we're going to go to Congress, we're going to talk about these issues, we're going to get every one of you organized in order to do this. So this is more on the national scene, what's happening. Then we have the reporters. The reporters are going to talk with these individuals from the local and the national scene, and the AVMA and the AAVMC, they have agreed to actually take the lead from here and to do the communications several different ways to get the information out there. So they're going to periodically, these reporters are going to interview members of these groups. They're going to have phone conversations. They're going to synthesize these into progress reports, work with the AVMA and the AAVMC, and we have to continually keep this out in front. And working with Mia, we're going to have some sessions at NAVC coming up. We're going to have sessions at AAVMC coming up, and hopefully at Western. We've got to keep this as hot issues. So the next steps, the commitment at the summit, or the updates, the progress reports, opportunities for input. AAVMC, the VIN Foundation, and AVMA step forward at the summit. They're going to create databases regarding total cost of education. They're actually going to develop report cards. What are the colleges doing? Report cards for prospective students for the colleges. AAVMC is partnering with the Veterinary Business Management Association to build recommendations on how veterinary colleges to improve the students' ability to manage their debt. And certainly we're doing presentations such as the one today and be available at any of the meetings so we can talk about this issue and get people involved. So what has happened? I want to show a very short film here. So we've had since the summit, and this is one of them that we've had. I can move this out of the way. Oops. What have I done here? Well, maybe I'm not going to show you this. There we go.
Veterinary medicine is a career field more broad and expansive than you might think. Did you know there are tons of veterinary jobs available outside of traditional clinical practice? Many of these career options provide excellent salaries, benefits, and work-life balance. This video will give you a brief look into some of the many options out there and how to learn more, whether you are just starting your career or are an experienced professional.
Do not shy away or let anyone discourage you from making major career changes throughout your journey.
Some veterinary career categories include academics, associations, government and regulation, corporate management, research and diagnostics, uniformed services, writing, publishing, and media work, and much more. Here are some testimonials from veterinarians working outside traditional clinical practice.
As a lifelong learner, employment in the pharmaceutical industry has provided opportunity for me to leverage my medical knowledge while expanding my understanding of business and clinical research.
There are education-based positions available in many industry corporations, including corporate medicine and the pharmaceutical, nutritional, and medical supply industries. For those with an interest in teaching and training, positions as technical services veterinarians or field veterinarians might be appealing.
Within laboratory animal medicine, veterinarians work as clinical veterinarians, managers, facility directors, scientists, as well as consultants.
While in practice, I sat on the Minnesota Board of Animal Health, which is a 5-person citizen board composed of 2 veterinarians and 3 producers that oversees the state veterinarian's office. I was impressed by the dedication of the veterinarians working there and also by the complex problems that they handle, and I became interested in public policy.
There are so many wonderful opportunities available to veterinarians. Do your research, talk with individuals in your area of interest, and take the plunge.
Please visit avma.org for a more comprehensive list of veterinary career opportunities, as well as a behavioral competency list that can help translate the skills you have mastered in a clinical veterinary medicine environment in a new light. From the home page, hover over Professional Development, and then click on Personal Development. Then click on Veterinary Career Transitions. This video is a joint effort of the American Association of Veterinary State Boards, the National Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners, the American Veterinary Medical Association, and the United States Department of Agriculture's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service to make future and current veterinarians aware of the many types of opportunities available. This video is an outcome of the 2016 Fix the Debt, Our Future, Our Responsibility Summit, hosted by Michigan State University and co-sponsored by the AAVMC and AVMA. Testimonial footage courtesy of the AVMA.
So again, just an example of some of the things that are happening. We want to be sure that the veterinary students are getting an equal opportunity of exposure to careers in veterinary medicine. We're about done here, about 2 more slides. This is just, again, here's Michigan State. This is the things that we're doing here is an example of what veterinary colleges can or need to do. We can't go in right now and tell the provost to reduce tuition, but she has agreed to reduce the amount of increase of tuition. It's been going up 4% every year. She has agreed to increase it only 2%. The dean's providing a $1,000 scholarship to all out-of-state students who apply. We're going to have our undergraduate pre-vet requirements attainable in 2 years, and we're going to start looking very seriously at admitting those students. Scholarships are #1 priority for development. We're revising our curriculum right now. We're going to have more career-ready veterinarians to demand higher salaries. We're adding career and debt counselors to our program. And we've already had a number of key federal legislators here at the CVM over the last 2 months preparing for the Higher Education Act to be open. So in summary, this is what we've done from March 2015 through today. Everything that I've said about the summit, but the one I want to stop at is this one. this is really about change management for all of us in veterinary medical education, in how we pay our new veterinarians. So I want you to look at this. This is a normal time and how people go through issues. You know, is it in shock about what we've just talked about? Are we in denial? Are we blaming others? Are we depressed? Are we accepting it? Are we feeling optimism? And are we going up here and are we integrating a new meaning and reinventing ourselves? So this is kind of a normal curve on change. Same thing down here. Do we have an increased urgency? Are we building a team? Are we getting the right vision for where we need to be? Are we communicating? Are we creating short-term wins? And are we not letting up and are we keep going? So, you know, where are we on this? So the last poll, Mia, is again for the attendees. Where are you personally on the transition change management timeline concerning student debt to starting income issue? So where are you personally on this issue? Just curious, again, on what we have here.
Thank you, Mike. The poll is active, so if you would like to go ahead and complete the poll, and I'll let the group know while you guys are completing the poll that we will go ahead and submit the now 4 questions that have been submitted during the webinar to Mike, and we'll get feedback to you via email in the next week or so. So thank you so much for those that have engaged in the poll and in the questions. Looks like the majority have answered the poll. So I will go ahead and close that out and share the results. And Mike, it looks like 70% are somewhere in the acceptance, experimentation, optimism area. We have 20% that are somewhere in the blame, panic, depression area, and then 10% that are somewhere in the satisfaction, integration, new meaning area.
Okay, kind of a bell curve, which very, again, no right or wrong answer, but it gives us an idea of where we are. So again, I want to thank everybody. I am available if anyone wants this webinar somewhere else or wants anyone to come to speak about this. It's a huge, huge issue that we have in our profession, and only working together can we tackle this. So I know I've gone over a few minutes, but I appreciate your indulgence, and I will answer your questions, and hopefully we'll have more dialogue. So Mia, thank you for your help, and thank everybody for being on the webinar.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike, so much for your very important presentation, for sharing these critical updates about our profession, and also to those of you that made the time in your very busy schedules to join us these evenings. We will send to you within 24 hours a link so that you can complete a survey providing your feedback about the webinar. We encourage you to take the time to complete this so that we can incorporate your thoughts into future programming. After your survey has been submitted, you will receive your CE certificate via email. And also, Dr. Chaddock has agreed to share his slides, as I mentioned during our opening, so I will be forwarding those out to all that have attended. So again, thank you so much, Mike, for sharing all of your insights this evening, and I wish you all a very happy evening. Take care.